America's trade policies have always been a major talking point in global economics. Tariffs are one of the strongest tools the U.S. government uses to protect local industries, counter unfair trade practices, and even influence global politics. Over the years, the U.S. has imposed tariffs on multiple countries, leading to economic shifts and political tensions. Today, we'll look at 5 countries that might soon face new U.S. tariffs and explore the reasons behind these possible trade actions. Our first country is China. The trade war continues. The U.S.-China trade war has been going on for years, and things don't seem to be cooling down anytime soon. The American government has long accused China of unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft, state subsidies for industries, and currency manipulation. While tariffs on Chinese goods have already been in place since the Trump administration, the Biden administration has continued to take a tough stance. Recently, there have been growing concerns about China's dominance in the manufacturing sector, especially in high-tech industries like semiconductors, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence. The U.S. has been pushing to reduce its dependence on Chinese-made products and strengthen domestic manufacturing. If tensions escalate further, the U.S. might impose even higher tariffs on Chinese goods, targeting sectors like electronics, machinery, and green energy components. China, on the other hand, is not one to back down easily. If new tariffs are imposed, Beijing could retaliate with its own trade restrictions, leading to yet another escalation in the ongoing economic conflict. This could impact global supply chains and drive up prices for everyday products in both countries. Number 2. Mexico. Trade tensions with a key partner. Mexico is one of America's largest trading partners, thanks to the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which replaced NAFTA. However, despite strong trade relations, there are ongoing tensions that could lead to new tariffs. One of the biggest issues is immigration. The U.S. has frequently used economic pressure to push Mexico into strengthening border security and controlling illegal migration. In the past, former President Trump threatened to impose tariffs on all Mexican goods if Mexico didn't take action to reduce illegal crossings. While the Biden administration has taken a different approach, political pressure from U.S. lawmakers could bring the tariff debate back to the table. Another issue is Mexico's growing role in the automotive and manufacturing sectors. Many American companies have shifted their production to Mexico due to lower labor costs, leading to concerns about job losses in the U.S. If the government sees this as a threat to American workers, it might impose tariffs on certain Mexican goods, particularly in the automobile and steel industries. Number 3. Vietnam. Rising competition in manufacturing. Vietnam has been gaining attention as an alternative manufacturing hub to China. Many companies, including big American brands, have moved their production to Vietnam to avoid high costs and U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. While this shift has benefited Vietnam's economy, it has also caught the attention of American policymakers. The U.S. has accused Vietnam of currency manipulation, meaning the country is allegedly keeping its currency artificially low to make its exports cheaper. This gives Vietnamese products a price advantage in international markets, including the U.S. If Washington believes Vietnam's trade practices are hurting American manufacturers, it could impose tariffs on Vietnamese goods, particularly in industries like textiles, electronics, and furniture. Additionally, concerns about Vietnam's reliance on Chinese raw materials have also emerged. If the U.S. sees Vietnam as a backdoor for Chinese goods to enter the American market tariff-free, it might introduce stricter trade policies to prevent such practices. Number 4. India. A complicated but growing trade relationship. India and the United States share a strong partnership, but when it comes to trade, things aren't always smooth. Over the years, both countries have had their fair share of disagreements, and despite growing economic ties, India could be one of the countries the U.S. might impose tariffs on in the future. One of the biggest reasons for trade tensions is India's high import duties. The U.S. has repeatedly criticized India for placing high tariffs on American products. For example, American dairy products, medical devices, and even motorcycles like Harley-Davidson have faced high import taxes in India. Former President Donald Trump often complained about this, calling India the tariff king. While negotiations have helped lower some of these duties, they are still a major issue in trade discussions. Another point of contention is India's push for self-reliance. The Indian government has launched initiatives like Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, which means self-reliant India, to boost domestic manufacturing. While this is great for India's economy, it has led to concerns in the US that American companies are losing access to the Indian market. For example, India has introduced strict rules on e-commerce that affect companies like Amazon and Walmart-owned Flipkart, making it harder for them to compete with local businesses. If the US sees this as unfair trade practice, it might respond with tariffs on Indian goods. There's also the issue of pharmaceuticals and medical supplies. India is one of the largest exporters of generic medicines to the US, and American pharmaceutical companies have raised concerns about India's pricing policies and patent laws. If tensions escalate, the US might impose restrictions on Indian pharmaceutical exports, which could impact both economies since American consumers rely heavily on affordable medicines from India. Additionally, the tech and IT industry has been another area of disagreement. Indian IT companies, like TCS, Infosys, and Wipro, provide software and outsourcing services to American companies, saving them billions of dollars. However, the US government has often raised concerns about job losses due to outsourcing and has even restricted H-1B work visas, which are widely used by Indian tech professionals. If protectionist policies increase, the US might introduce tariffs or regulations that make it harder for Indian IT firms to operate smoothly in the American market. Another concern is India's trade with Russia. Since the war in Ukraine, the US has been pressuring countries to reduce their economic ties with Russia. However, India has continued to buy discounted Russian oil and other commodities, arguing that it needs to secure affordable energy for its growing population. While the US understands India's position, some American lawmakers believe that India should align more closely with Western sanctions. If this issue becomes a major sticking point, the US could use tariffs as a way to push India toward reducing trade with Russia. Despite these challenges, India and the US also have a lot of mutual benefits in trade. India is a major consumer market for American companies, and US businesses like Apple, Google, and Tesla are investing heavily in India. The two countries are also cooperating on technology, defense, and infrastructure projects. Because of this, both sides are likely to negotiate rather than engage in a full-scale trade war. So, will the US impose tariffs on India? It's possible, but not as likely as with some other countries like China or Russia. The relationship between India and the US is complex, and while there are trade disputes, there is also strong economic and political cooperation. Any tariffs imposed by the US would probably be targeted at specific industries rather than a broad-based trade war. So our last country is Russia. Russia is already facing some of the harshest economic sanctions in the world, mostly due to geopolitical tensions and its military actions. But even with all these restrictions, the US might still consider imposing additional tariffs on Russian goods as another way to weaken its economy. Let's take a closer look at why this could happen and which industries might be affected. One of the biggest targets for potential tariffs is Russian energy exports. Before the Ukraine conflict, Russia was a major supplier of oil and natural gas to many countries, including the US. However, after the war started, the US banned Russian oil imports, forcing companies to look for alternative sources. But despite this, Russian oil still finds its way into global markets, sometimes through indirect trade routes. To tighten the pressure, the US could impose additional tariffs or restrictions on any products linked to Russian energy, making it harder for Russia to profit from its oil and gas exports. Another industry that could face higher tariffs is Russian metals and minerals. Russia is one of the world's largest producers of aluminum, nickel, and palladium, materials that are crucial for industries like aerospace, automotive, and electronics. While the US has already imposed some restrictions on Russian metals, additional tariffs could make these imports even more expensive. The goal would be to push American manufacturers to source metals from other countries, reducing Russia's economic influence. Then there's the agriculture sector. Russia is a leading exporter of wheat, fertilizers, and other agricultural products. While American farmers don't rely heavily on Russian wheat, fertilizers are a different story. Many US agricultural businesses use fertilizers that come from Russia or its ally, Belarus. If the US decides to impose tariffs on these products, it could lead to higher costs for American farmers, which in turn might raise food prices. This is one area where the US has to be careful. While tariffs could hurt Russia's economy, they could also create problems at home. Technology and defense industries are also under scrutiny. Russia has been developing its own tech industry, but it still relies on certain American-made components, especially in high-tech fields like semiconductors and aviation. While existing sanctions already limit these exports, new tariffs could make it even more difficult for Russia to access crucial technology, further weakening its industrial capabilities. Finally, there's the issue of trade loopholes. Some Russian products are still making their way into the US and its allies through third-party countries. For example, Russian oil refined in India or metals processed in China might enter global markets without being clearly labeled as Russian. To counter this, the US could impose tariffs on goods that are suspected of being linked to Russia, even if they come through other countries. What's next? The US government's trade policies are influenced by a mix of economic, political, and strategic factors. While tariffs can protect American industries, they can also lead to higher prices for consumers and trade retaliation from other countries. If the US moves forward with new tariffs on these 5 countries, China, Mexico, Vietnam, India, and Russia, it could reshape global trade dynamics. Businesses and consumers alike would feel the impact, as supply chains adjust and economic relationships shift. For now, all eyes are on Washington to see how these trade policies unfold. Will diplomacy prevent new tariffs, or are we headed for more trade conflicts? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on global trade and economics. See you in the next video.